message privately to you, because I don't think everybody here would be bothered with reaction or whatever. So I think the chat section would be better to use, so they can just send a private message to you to say, hey, I want to speak, so you kind of mute them.
Absolutely, that works as well.
Yes. All right, I'm leaving you guys now. Enjoy. Bye.
Bye, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so what I wanted to do looks not possible. Why do we have all these names and there's no face to it?
Because they don't have pictures.
No, but they can't get in?
No, they're there, but they blocked their...
They want to block their pictures.
They're on stop video.
Okay, no, I understood.
Yeah.
It's sort of a, what I say is I wanted everyone to say
hello. Oh, I see. Okay.
Right. But yeah. Yes. Okay, Abby will talk.
No, you asked the question, I was answering it. Oh, okay. Are we all here? Are we all ready? Why can't I see Salima's face? Oh, there she is. Okay, I see you, Salima. All right, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for your patience. In this Zoom world, we're all learning different kinds of ways of connecting. So I'm glad that all Salima's friends are here. Well, Salima's friends who've managed the technology are actually here at the moment. And Akosua and I are in Brasilia, in Brazil. And really...
Salima's muted. Wendy.
Okay, other people are joining. Let me unmute her.
Salima should never be muted, please.
I think she may have muted herself, but I've asked to unmute her.
Oh no, don't
mute me.
Oh
my God!
I'm just silence the author.
Okay, you know what? I'm hungry to get started and hear something. So I think, Wendy.
Yes, we are definitely ready.
You're okay, still letting people in, etc., etc. I think we should.
Wendy, put your picture up.
Put my
picture. Put your camera on you.
Okay, give me 2 seconds. I'm going live. I had to type information into Facebook. There we go.
Yeah!
Hi there.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I feel better. So we will talk, but I don't think we should talk first because it's been a bit to get in. And I don't know who's here for just a minute and who's going and all that, but I wouldn't want anyone to leave and not actually hear some of this fabulous book. So I think, without much further ado, Salima, you should give us just a tiny, and not too much, because your book, what's fabulous, I don't know who knows what about whatever, but it's a memoir. So it's not a novel, it's a memoir. So it really, a lot of it speaks for itself, but because we won't get the whole book tonight, Salima, because we won't get the whole book tonight, I think you could give us a little, speak a little bit and then give us some, so that I would hate anybody to leave and not have actually heard the words of the book.
Okay. Like I said, you can't shut me up once I get started. So, hey. Thank you, everybody. I don't know. It looks backwards to me. It might look backwards to you. I don't know, but whatever. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. And I am so grateful for everyone who came. I'm so sorry for everybody who had the problems I did, because I even got a phone call from Alifu. She couldn't get in either. Like, I could help with that, but hopefully she'll get in. So hi to everybody, and thank you so much for coming. And I've been pretty stunned at what happened, although it's not like I didn't work for it. But before midnight of the day that this book was published and put live on Amazon, it was Amazon's #1 new release in 4 categories, which included R&B and soul and dancer memoirs. So I thought that was pretty outstanding, and that's because of the people like you who all got to see it. See what? Okay, and see that? Okay, that speaks for itself. What's behind me? All right. So anyhow, I was going to welcome you with a song, but you know, my technical advisor tells me that music doesn't go too well. So you could hear a few seconds of it if you like, because this is me. If you don't like it, I'm only going to play like a beginning of it. If I can figure out how to do that.
House full.
Well, this is what I believe in. All right. All right, now I'm turning that off. Come on now. Stop it, Jimmy. We're done. Anyway, welcome! I want to give you guys a little fun. You know, I'm not a technical genius. If it wasn't for Wendy Vaughn, I would still be using a cassette player and pen and paper. So anyway, thank you for coming. The book is titled Since I Lost My Baby, a memoir of temptations, trouble, and truth. And it's basically, most of the book is about my coming of age journey as an outsider. And it's bookended between, by first the loss of my newborn daughter, who I was forced to give up for adoption at birth in 1967, and our amazing, spectacular reunion in 1991. And what's in between those 2 years is what happened since I lost my baby, and how the power of soul music, including Motown, Stax, the blues, African and gospel, carried me through all of that. So it's kind of like Forrest Gump meets Soul Train, okay? So I picked out a couple different passages. I'm gonna just run it past all the gatekeepers, even though I'm FTG. Which ones you want to hear. The first one is going to go about 15 or 16 minutes if you want to hear that. That has to do with the transformational moment of my life as an outsider when I was 14. And the second one is about, what is the second one about? Oh, when I saw Otis Redding live at the Monterey Pop Festival. And the third one is about carrying through the whole theme of African dance. So probably the one that makes sense to read first is the first one I was going to read, which is from chapter 2. And just to fill in the gaps for some of the references that I've done, I was born in the 1950s during what was called the Cold War. It's kind of who's going to blink or bomb first with Russia. And that instilled anxiety in most kids, me included, because I was certain the end was coming, and that one day I'd look up from my school playground and see Russian bombers flying overhead like a hateful flock of birds. My outsider status was sealed then too. At 10 years old, I was 5'5". I weighed 130 pounds. I needed Kotex and a bra, and I had an IQ of 160. I didn't look like the other kids. I didn't think like them. And my parents, as loving as they were, had no clue what to do with me. I mean, really, who would? And part of that has to do with the fact that my mother was an illegal immigrant to this country and came in under the backseat of a car when she was a child, and was traumatized by that her whole life as being, you know, undocumented. But you can ask me about that later. It's just so you know the references here. And I was also growing up in a rapidly changing era, which was the 1960s, and I didn't have an elder or a sibling or a school teacher to guide me. The adults all around me, the best advice they could give was just pretend it never happened. And so in my book, that theory takes on a life of its own, and I call it the river, as in river denial. So just to get started, I write in the book that each and every one of us is born a true believer, irresistibly, humanly hardwired, to accept that everything our parents tell us is true, no matter how preposterous, confusing, or out of touch with what we will shortly and perhaps shockingly discover is the way the real world works. So the question that my book asks of readers and speaks to the choices that I made, including searching for real love, the big truth, and my daughter during an era when there was no internet and I had to use a bounty hunter and, you know, God knows how I found it, you know. But the question is this: when what you believe turns out to be a lie, how far will you go for the truth? So with that, let me start with the moment that changed my life. The first moment that changed my life. All right. I see you taking a seat and relaxing, my sisters. This is Los Angeles, 1964 to 65. By the time I was 14, I'd grown into my too big for childhood body. My horsey overbite had been corrected with braces. Oops, sorry. I didn't mean to start there. Ah! Let me go back. Wendy, do you want me on the big screen or we're just highlighting our guests?
No, you're on the big screen on mine.
You're on the big screen.
Oh, well, I'm getting to look at you guys then. Woohoo! All right, pull out the popcorn. Here we go.
Reba, you're on the big screen, and that's where we need you and want you. You're huge.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just can't see me, but that's probably better. All right. The way I see it, along with being born true believers, we are also equipped with an intuitive antenna to discern truth from lies and that which is life-giving from that which is not. All of us arrive in this world with a functioning antenna until it's bent, broken, or hacked off altogether by people in authority who tell you that what you see isn't what you think it is, that what you feel isn't real, and that when anything happens to hurt you, the best thing to do is pretend it never happened. Los Angeles, 1964-65. Turned out. By the time I was 14, I'd grown into my too big for childhood body. My horsey overbite had been corrected with braces, and as long as I didn't say too many sentences in a row, you might have mistaken me for anyone else. Junior high had put some welcome distance between me and my elementary school tormentors. I was in awe of the so-called cheap girls from the 9th grade with their tight skirts and confident swagger. Yet despite my aching emptiness, I remained true to what I thought my parents wanted me to believe about being a good girl, though if asked, I could not have explained what that was. It didn't add up to substance or motivation, but having no other frame of reference, I accepted this irrelevance as how things probably were for everybody. Life was just a random series of meaningless events, and then you die. Just passing through. Why bother? What, me worry? The kid across the street, Richard, and I used to play ball and do stuff like ride our bikes in the dirt, collect old cans, and play store. He was 3 years older than me, and while he was my most consistent playmate, I can't say I thought of him as my friend. Being friends seemed to involve sharing secrets and emotions and other things that Richard and I never talked about. Maybe it was because he was a boy. I'd just ring the front doorbell and he'd come out and we'd play. It was October, and Richard had gotten hold of free tickets to a taping at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, a live concert for teenagers showcasing popular and emerging American and British artists like the Beach Boys and the Rolling Stones. Filmed in a new technology called Electronavision, the concert was to be shown later that year in movie theaters. It was called Teenage Music International, or The Tammy Show. My parents liked Richard, knew it wasn't, heaven forbid, a date or anything like that, so they let me go. Richard borrowed his dad's two-tone Buick, and we drove to Santa Monica, parked in the lot, and took our seats with thousands of other teenage kids in the cavernous auditorium. Screaming comes naturally when you're young, hormone-fueled, and prevented by social taboos from expressing yourself any other way. In 1964, kids were still clean-cut and skirts were still knee-length. So it's no surprise that the ear-splitting sound of screaming teenagers attended every moment of the Tammy Show taping. It was in the middle of this great human outpouring that I was baptized in what would become the litany and gospel of my life. Teenage life. Motown. I had never before seen performers like the Miracles and Marvin Gaye with their sultry, slick moves, or girls like the Supremes, all pouty and hairsprayed and glamorous. Something began to resonate inside me, not only to the rhythms of their music, but also to the words celebrating heartbreak, betrayal, and suffering. I didn't understand it, but I felt it. Out of the meaningless void with which I'd tried to come to terms, Motown exposed me to another world in which there was a place for passion, a world in which love was both the thing that saved you and the thing that sent you to hell. But when a compact black tornado in a checkered jacket with a mile-high pompadour took the stage, skating across on one foot, screeching and howling like a trapped coyote, and then, microphone stand and all, crashed to his knees, only to be comforted, caped, and brought to his feet by two lanky, conked brothers in shiny suits, and then break loose, stomping and wailing and busting through every inhibition known to man, I knew I had stumbled upon the threshold to heaven. And nothing would ever be the same. I had just encountered Mr. Dynamite himself, James Brown, and the famous Flames. It was the first time I'd ever witnessed anyone acting out all the madness and fury that I felt, having been rejected by kids, shut down by my parents, and made to think that nobody else in the world was like me. In James Brown, I saw a man who wasn't embarrassed or afraid to express all the exuberance and emotions that I had always been forced to restrain in myself. I'd come to the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium believing that life was just a series of random, meaningless events, and left a born-again convert to the power that exploded from its stage. Something got a hold of me, and as if revived from the dead, my antenna began to regrow. My previously pointless existence now honed in on that long-denied feeling and the uninhibited expression of it, soul. Where does it come from? What does it mean? Those two questions began to influence every choice I made and compelled my life's most imperative quest to make direct contact with and be validated by something that was really real. My first stop was KGFJ, Los Angeles' soul music station. Here, disc jockeys like the magnificent Montague, whose on-air catchphrase, "Burn, baby, burn," would become the anthem of the Watts riots 10 months later, kept me fed on a rich diet of soul music from artists like Bo Diddley, the Isley Brothers, and Ike and Tina Turner. I didn't know anything about race and its implications. With my transistor radio now my lifeline and permanently stuck to my ear, all I knew was that soul music was the first thing that had ever moved me. Even if there was something unholy going on in the relationships the artist sang about, something sacred was going on inside that music, something that lifted up more than my ears. I was irresistibly drawn by an intangible presence in the wailing music and desperate lyrics that begged for love, glorified its union, or brokenheartedly mourned its loss. After the Tammy Show, I started going to dances at the Valley Teen Center, a flat-roofed shoebox of a building on Victory Boulevard in Van Nuys. Unlike all-white North Hollywood where I lived, kids at the Teen Center came from the Black and Mexican neighborhoods of Pacoima and San Fernando. Although I had been klutzy and unathletic in school, I happily discovered I was a good dancer. It was a form of communication that, unlike words, could not be misunderstood. I fell in love with dancing and discovered who I could be through it. Sweaty Saturday nights at the Teen Center were like tribal rituals, sometimes with a partner or all of us together, thumbs out for Marvin Gaye's Hitchhike, or going down the middle of the room between two lines of other dancers to Junior Walker and the All-Stars' Shotgun. It was soul music and seductive mayhem. flaunting our indestructible young flesh with confidence. Nothing less than the real thing would do. When the lights went down, we paired off into couples, tempting fate in the slow dances and whispering our terminal love to one another. Only the tambourine of Martha and the Vandellas' Nowhere to Run could shake us out of our trance. I was hooked. I started taking the bus after school to Hollywood, where I would head for the KTLA studios on Sunset and Van Ness to dance on Casey Kasem's TV show, Shebang. It was a kick to watch myself on our TV at home prancing around with the show's regulars, as well as artists like Little Stevie Wonder, who came to lip sync their hits. Though I never went to the show with a partner, the cameraman always photographed me dancing in a way that looked like I was with someone. It was one of the few frauds I could take pride in. Between KGFJ, the Teen Center, and dancing on Shebang, I found my place in the universe. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged. I was no longer the oddball. The music and songs spoke to my inner being, and in turn, I could make people respond to me through dance. I expected my parents to be overjoyed when I told them that I had finally made friends with kids who liked me and who thought about the same things I did, including one boy from the Teen Center who'd become my regular Saturday night dance partner. Assuming that they would want to meet my new friends, I asked to invite them to our house for lunch. I was floored when my parents told me no, because my friends were Black. Like most Jews, my parents claimed to be liberals, voted Democrat, and nodded their endorsement of the civil rights movement. Assuming that meant they were open-minded, I had dismissed my mother's antagonism towards Gentiles, whom she called Goyim or heathens, as simply her peculiar landscape, never imagining that Black people might be included in that category. "What are you talking about?" I said. "Aren't you?" "Oh, sorry. You're not inviting them here," my father said. "Don't give them our address." "What are you talking about?" I said. "Aren't you happy for me? Aren't all men created equal? That's what they teach us at school. That's what you taught us. We can't have them over here, not at our house." "Please," I begged. "These are the first real friends I've ever had. I just want you to meet them." "There will be other friends," said my mother. "You're hypocrites." "Enough," said my dad. "You'll do what we say. You're too young to understand." And with that, the case was closed. My trust in my parents was shattered. And at that moment, my world split from theirs. With no greater truth to hang on to, I'd been a true believer in the irrelevance that their fears had wrought in me. But now that I knew what it felt like to be happy, there was no turning back. I wasn't going to give up my friends in favor of their prejudice. It was the breach that invalidated everything my parents had ever taught me. That's the thing about being a true believer. It's all or nothing. There's no dimmer switch. Nothing my parents said could dampen the flame that had been ignited in my heart. I'd become part of a community in which people questioned their place in the world as I did, and the soul-wrenching, exhilarating depth of the music drew us together into what I'd been searching for my whole life, something that was really real. Dancing was our perfectly understood, wordless, rhetoric-free language. For the first time, I felt like I mattered. And on Saturday nights and at the TV studio, I was free to discover, express, and be all that I really was. I loved my parents, but they turned my happiness into a racial issue in which all of us lost our identities and were divided by things over which we had no control. So I abandoned their authority and became a star pupil to the raspy, tortured treatises of David Ruffin, lead singer of the Temptations, and a diehard disciple of the Gospel of Gordy, Saint Stax and Master Motown. The message my musical teachers taught me was that being loved was the only thing worth living for. Whether it was ecstasy or agony didn't matter, as long as you were committed to a lovesick drama powerful enough to kill you. The wounds of so much love were like tribal scarring, painful but necessary rites of passage into the depths of my soul. And at 15 years old, I had no idea how much deeper it would go. There's a break. Once a week, my mother dropped me off at the North Hollywood Public Library, a Spanish-style building set among a sheltering grove of eucalyptus trees. Their pungent smell registered deeply that season in which I was growing out of my childhood and evoked a longing for something I didn't understand, but I knew I wanted. I loved the library. It was where I could go and lose my problems in the rows and rows of books about other people's lives. I set a goal to read every novel in the 4 bookcases of the fiction section. Had I been the sort of genius that does things in a methodical way, I would not have started in the W's. But that's where I met the next person to articulate the feelings I couldn't. His books opened the door to a world that, in its own brutal and chaotic way, made more sense than the whitewashed bland one I was being forced to grow up in. The words and ideas of author Richard Wright, the fixated meditations on being different, a stranger to the world and its hopes, an involuntary nonconformist with no identity except that triggered by chance, madness, and tyranny, transformed my disjointed teenage angst into an existential purpose unto itself. Richard Wright's stories were laced with pervading anxiety and guilt that could never be put right, dreams and nightmares that supplanted reality, and all of it resonated to a frightening place in my own mind that had never been spoken to before. The alienated and victimized characters of Richard Wright, who found their truth in violence and madness, fed what my intellectual mind longed for, while the throbbing rhythm of soul music, the raw passion that fleshed out of James Brown, and the rattlesnake tambourine and long-suffering lyrics of Motown gave me flesh and bones so I could dance instead of explode. Later, when I went to college, I read the works of writers like Ralph Ellison, who gave further dimension and voice to the estrangement I had always felt and the confusing rage I was beginning to harbor. The Black writers in whose works I soaked confirmed the apocalyptic terror that had haunted me since elementary school, that the end was as imminently approaching as a hateful flock of birds. I was too young to have any discernment, so I took it all in. Once again, I became a true believer, not knowing that a white girl from North Hollywood wasn't supposed to identify with the likes of Bigger Thomas, and that not everything Motown was telling me was true. This is a break. I want to make something clear before we go any farther. There aren't any bad guys in my story. I might say some bad things, but all the people I'm telling you about did what they did either because they were doing their jobs or because they didn't know any better, like my parents. Some meant well, others did not. It wasn't anyone's fault, not even the scoundrels who broke my heart, not even Khrushchev. Even the militant Black students I met in college who pontificated that I had no right to appropriate their writers and their pain to my life were right in one sense. The alienation and disenfranchisement I experienced wasn't because of the color of my skin. I was an outsider because I was different. There are many kinds of different, but in the end, any one of us can be subject to the powerless terror of Bigger Thomas, or the fractured fallout of a ride into the promised land under the backseat of a car. When you cut through all the labels, excuses, and blame, I was born who I am and tossed like a frisbee into the circle of life. And only God is responsible for that. There you go.
Woo! Everyone's clapping. I don't know if you can see everybody.
I have more if you want more, but it's up to you. You can have a little Otis Redding if you want to kind of uplift the whole thing, but it's up to you.
I think we will have more. I think we'll listen more than we'll talk. Wendy, be ready to unmute people who want to talk. I could only see 9 people, but I was watching. And I want to say, Salima, having known you for more years than I want to admit that I was on this earth. So, even though I had the privilege of reading this in early times in New Jersey, going over, being with you through even the finding and all that, and though I should know, I'm still completely mesmerized as you read. I'm so emotionally moved that you've captured a moment in time that I know many people lived, and I think articulate. I was watching Terry's face, because I think Terry's my other sort of North Hollywood and whatever. You're probably Terry. It's the person I would most place in knowing everything that Salima will open her mouth to say in terms of experience and location and music. I think it's going to be a major book. And I just want to say that so honored to be hosting the first launch. And I mean that in all sincerity. I really do.
Thank you. And I'm so honored that you chose to do this for me, both of you. And, you know, the whole Mayabusia sisters. Thank you so much.
So I saw someone taking up screen duty. I don't want to be the only one talking. So can someone wave? I noticed someone came full screen. Was she unmuted? If anyone has a question, I hear. Can you read this from Vanessa? We're having messages. Can you unmute Vanessa for a moment?
Absolutely.
Can you unmute
So,
Hi, Vanessa.
hi there. So this, good. She's already muted.
Right.
Ourselves. So
Yes.
when we want to speak, we can just unmute ourselves.
Yes.
I'm so pleased to be here to see all of you. Salima, your work is so captivating. And it's so fascinating to see and to hear your story, particularly as it relates today, to what's going on in the world today, and the strength of writing, and when we tell one story, and how, however specific we are to our lives, someone else who also feels like an outsider,
Right.
who also feels like they want to be heard, can really move, can really find themselves in that story. And that's what's the business of writing and performing and telling your story as specifically as you can, because there's a way when you're honest and authentic like you are, and just sharing all of the things that meant to you. I identified with my own coming of age story, with the longing of teenage years, the strict parents that tell you what to do. It was really, really, really brilliant. And it also reminds me, you know, there's like a saying or a t-shirt that I have that a friend made for me, you know, and it speaks to this moment in terms of, you know, white people awakening and acknowledging their privilege and the systematic racism that's been in this country and formulated, you know, our existence in the country. And it says, you know, love my people like you love my music. And so when you were talking about Motown and what it means to you, and just the power of the music, that it moved your soul, like you didn't know if it was unholy, but there was something sacred in it. I think that's the experience of so many people and so many white people. It's why the movie The Big Chill was such a hit, because it was the soundtrack to so many people's lives.
Yeah.
And it's just really, really wonderful and thrilling to see it come to life this way. And I had no idea about, and the title is so perfect, because it's about and just like the way, even the way you like drop lyric as a part of the storytelling in there too. Like we catching all of that. It's fun.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you.
I don't know if I saw Halifu there sending a comment. Is Halifu live?
Hey, Halifu.
Yeah, Halifu sent a message to Camille. I don't know if everyone can see the messages.
I can see them.
Okay, good. I would like to hear more, because I know that you have these different pockets you know, and I literally, it's so funny because as a person who grew up with soul music from this side, if you like, I want to say from the inside where it, you know, it's how you are, if you like, hearing it from just when the way you describe the revelation of that freedom, it made me realize how much for granted I take the way we worship, the way we dance, the way we mourn, the way we, you know, something that you take for granted. Maybe we call it Black privilege, but you know, that part, you know what I mean? You know, and so to hear it is so rich and honest, to hear how, I mean, I felt your freedom. I felt it when you walked through those doors and found, you know, this is something else. But anyway, I would like you to read something from another part, another whatever. I think great. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you. I did see everybody's comments. Thank you so much. That just really blesses my heart. I'm glad. I can't really see who everybody's in here, but I know who commented. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me because I haven't had this reaction before. So anyway, the next part that I would like to read to you, because this kind of gives you another part of the picture of my story. Just to sort of catch you up on this, I got pregnant when I was 16, and I got sent to live in a last century, you know, relic of social shame and punishment, which was a home for unwed mothers called Florence Crittenton Home in Los Angeles. If you're interested in my story on that, you can go to my website and look at a crazy video that I did about that. And so anyway, it was a really crazy place, and at the end of the day, it was kind of like being a cuckoo's nest. And it's where I was forced to give my daughter away for adoption. Let me just ask this, Wendy, can you make my screen so I can see me? Just make sure I'm looking good and all that. The part that I'd like to read to you is at the end of my time there. I had to live there from November of 1966 until the beginning of April 1967. I was there for a long time. I don't know what the Madeline Sisters is, Vanessa. It was called the Florence Crittenton Home for Unwed Mothers. And that's where my family brought me, sent me to live. So it probably is similar to any other ones. Anyhow, this starts there after this is towards the end of my season there, and what happened afterwards, and what I took with me out of it. It's not the description of living in the place. You can find that. You can find my description of living in that place on my website, SalimaNimoy.com, called My Season in a Home for Unwed Mothers, which is pretty nuts. This is called Love Child, this section. In February 1967, oh, and let me just add this. We nicknamed the Home for Unwed Mothers, it was Florence Crittenton, we called it Flossies. So that's how it gets called in this book. In February 1967, about 1 month before my due date, I received in the mail a large manila envelope with no return address, out of which dropped two unfamiliar items: a copy of the Los Angeles Free Press and a hand-rolled marijuana cigarette, which I immediately flushed down the toilet. The headline story on the front page of the Free Press was about a protest on the Sunset Strip by 3,000 flower children against police manhandling and verbal abuse. The photos were of crazy-looking girls and geeky white boys. It was like reading about life on another planet. I folded the newspaper and put it away, having no clue how much sense it would make after I left Flossie's and gained enough perspective on what had happened to me there to join the angry ranks. When my time came, the night nurse donned her uniform and sweater, and it was my turn to ride in the station wagon as my predecessors had. I don't know what led me to expect better treatment from them, but the hospital staff wasn't nice to us fallen Flossie girls, leaving me to endure the agony of hard labor without so much as a kind word or touch. Maybe the nurses thought it was their duty to punish teen mothers. After 16 hours of labor, I gave birth to a baby girl. They let me hold her one time, and then, as promised, she was whisked away. By then, and minus a functioning antenna, I had convinced myself that what all the adults told me was true. I was too young to be a mother, and my baby would have a better life with somebody else. I secured that deadbolt of fake rationale by vowing that when I became an adult, I would never look back or wish I'd kept her. I committed myself to this decision with dogged, true believer blindness, hoping the power of that would forever shut the door on my feeling bad about what I'd done. Finally, like the rest of them, I too set up camp on the River Denial. This is the next chapter, the next section. Soul Man. He was earthy and raw, as big and powerful as the V8 engine on a Cadillac Eldorado. He could outplead and outrasp David Ruffin, and there was something about the gruffness in Otis Redding's voice that brought out the woman in me like no smooth slickster from Motown ever had. On stage, he worked himself into a magnetic frenzy, but Otis didn't lose control or need the mop-up crew like James Brown. There were no famous flames to carry and console him, even though his desperation-ridden cries of "please, please, please" tore your heart out. There were just the horn players egging him on, punctuating his stricken body on "I've been loving you too long," and heaving their mournful sighs on "Pain in my heart." He roughed up My Girl and may have sent the Temps in their shiny suits fleeing for cover with his chaotic stuttering in the vamp. Otis plowed his way through every song with full force and came out smiling from a heart as big and bright as the Georgia sun. And all of that propelled me toward the next place that soul music would take root in my life, a place where strong, gruff men would articulate the growing well of hurt in my soul and provide the perfect antithesis to my blossoming womanhood. I was just discovering the blues. Just as the untamed fervor of James Brown had turned me out, Otis Redding got deep down and personal in that part of me that was so bottomless and so hungry, and those same feelings that had been unleashed at the Tammy Show rose again to the surface, this time seasoned with the anguish and alienation of Richard Wright's books. When I heard that Otis Redding was going to perform at a pop festival in Monterey 3 months after I got out of Flossie's, I knew I had to go. My precious but clueless parents wanted to reward my graduation from high school, so I put in my request. My dad reserved a motel room for the three of us and purchased tickets for the Saturday night show. We drove up there in his big red Mercury. My conscience was still smoldering from the punishment I'd undergone at Flossie's, and I'd been trying to walk the straight and narrow path of obedience and do what I was told. But now, in June 1967, my skirts were too long, the rules I'd just agreed to follow were being broken by everyone else, and the draft cards, bras, and minds of all the other kids my age were going up in smoke. The Monterey Pop Festival would be my first face-to-face encounter with that strange bunch I read about in the Free Press. My parents and I arrived in Monterey, my mom bundled up in a warm coat, my father protective of us both in the midst of all that counterculture strangeness. I coiffed half my long hair into a huge bouffant, leaving the rest to hang down my back, and wore a pair of striped bell-bottom hip huggers with a vintage 1940s jacket. I thought I looked cool in a Carnaby Street sort of way. Prior to the concert, we strolled the long green expanse of the fairgrounds, looking at the booths of stoner stuff on display. The crowd ran the gamut from short hairs and paisley mod types to hippie potheads and fresh-faced flower children with no underwear. Mine was a generation in transition. The concert, as history would document, was the undisputed transformative moment of Otis Redding's career, just as James Brown's performance at the Tammy Show had been for him. None of us there in Monterey had any idea how privileged we were to experience this phenomenal old soul of so few years. Otis was only 25, who that night bridged the gap between the broken-hearted blues of Black folks and the starry-eyed abandon of the Flower Children. How could anyone know that we were about to lose him just a few months later when his plane plunged into an icy Wisconsin lake 2 weeks before Christmas? The Monterey Pop Festival was a unique and profound moment of history that wove together a diverse group of people into a remarkable tapestry of peace and love. There were no bad trips, no uprisings, no baton-wielding enforcers, no angry epithet spouting herds. That would come the next summer in Chicago at the Democratic Convention. And the summer after that, in the same week as Woodstock, it would all come to an end on the orders of Charles Manson. But for that one sweet weekend during the Summer of Love, straights and stoners, mods and hippies, even cops and counterculturists got happily and peacefully along with one another and drugs. Before any of us realized the hellish turn things would take, we abandoned all the rules with awe and wonder, calling it freedom. That and the music fused us into a force which, for better or worse, would overwhelm the next decade and change the world. I tried my best to be a good daughter, but I knew in my heart that eventually I'd go the way of the hippies. And not long after Monterey, I transited out of my parents' orbit and did just that. Yet the anger, cynicism, and resentment I'd taken with me from Flossie's would quickly speed dial me from the innocence of blowing bubbles to the in-your-face of wanting to blow up a whole lot more than that.
Wow.
Awesome.
I don't really want to stop to talk now. I have a request, Salima, if it's
Yes.
not to do, because you've gone, and just from having seen your book, I have such a vivid memory of you being dropped off at Flossie's because of, when we were in New Jersey. Are you able just to read a little part of that, which I know is
Oh, sure.
I would love.
What do you want to hear?
I think your journey there. I think when you were taken there.
Okay. Yeah. That's easy.
Okay. Right.
That's easy. It's called From Here to Maternity. I mean, what else? Los Angeles, 1960. This is just before what you just heard. 1966 to 67. As a memorial to his daughter, Florence, who died at the age of 4, Charles Crittenden established a safe haven in New York in 1883 to hide unmarried pregnant girls from disgrace and public scorn. Over time, Florence Crittenden homes popped up all over the United States, including one in Los Angeles at 234 East Avenue 33. Built in 1914, the Los Angeles home was where, in 1966, my parents decided to send me. November 1st arrived like any other morning, but I knew it wasn't. This would be the last time in 5 months that I would wake up in my own bedroom or hear the sound of gray doves cooing outside my window. While the girlfriends had partied it up at the Cinnamon Cinder nightclub the night before, I'd packed my suitcase. After an awkward breakfast, my parents and I got in the car and headed toward Lincoln Heights. I sat in the back seat. Busted or not, at 16, I would have been caught dead riding 3 in the front with my parents, and they knew it. I watched my familiar neighborhood go by and pretended I was on my way to Paris. Near downtown, we transitioned to the Pasadena Freeway and got off at Avenue 43. Following directions he'd written on a slip of paper, my father headed up the hill and took a right turn onto Griffin. My new home was safely tucked away in a district that had premiered 60 years earlier as the pride of Los Angeles. Its curving boulevard was lined with once charming bungalows that now sported peeling front porches and tired dry lawns. Gathered on every corner were brown men with shiny black hair. Over the year, this neighborhood with its Mexican stores and penchant for loud music and low cars had become like a foreign country to most white people. That made it perfectly suited for hiding their defiled daughters. I'm stopping because I think what you really wanted was the personal part, Akusua.
No, this is okay. I think you can.
Okay, all right. I'll add that other part later. I think I know what you're looking for. Less than 3 blocks from the Florence Crittenton home, Flossie's as it was nicknamed, was Booth Memorial, a Salvation Army home also for unwed mothers. A few miles away was St. Anne's, Los Angeles' third refuge/reformatory. Reputation had it, though not officially, that the limited spaces at Flossie's were reserved for upstanding white girls who'd made a tragic mistake. Booth Memorial, which was larger, was for Mexican Negroes and trashy whites, but not the hardened sexpots who wound up at St. Anne's. In 1966, the demand for these secret asylums was at a peak, and all 3 were filled with capacity. Flossie's was even adding a new wing, unaware that the entire stealthy system was but one graduating class in hippie live-in from extinction. An afternoon stroll of Lincoln Heights would reveal clusters of pregnant girls headed for 5 Points, a bustling intersection which tied together a Safeway, Thrifty drugstore, Jack in the Box, and a Woolworths, which was popular for its extensive selection of pastel-colored baby yarn and knitting needles. The Crittenton girls were free to walk openly in Lincoln Heights. There'd be no need to hide anyone's pregnant condition here. A few blocks from 5 Points was the Lincoln Heights Jail, another solid institution of reckoning for violators. Indeed, my new neighborhood was a cohesive community of prisoners, ethnic, moral, and civil. My father's car wound around Griffin Boulevard to Avenue 33, where he turned the corner into a narrow cul-de-sac, and I gasped at the sight of the behemoth Crittenton home. It rose ominously above the smaller houses on a dead-end street, its bleak windows reminding me of the Vincent Price movie, The House on Haunted Hill. As my father lifted my suitcase out of the trunk, I wanted to beg him not to leave me in this place. I was certain I would never get out alive. I'm skipping a part because I think this is where you want. I'm skipping the part
Actually,
what I was.
All of it is what I want.
Oh, you want all of it? Okie dokie. You got it, baby.
It's extraordinary. You're giving me what I want. I didn't want any.
Okay.
I just wanted.
What you want is what I want, my dear. Prisoner of love. The 3 of us sat in the director's cramped office. The windowless room sighed with the weight of human burden, but no relief for that seemed apparent despite the piles of evidence at hand. A credenza covered with stacks of messy folders filled half a wall. The files, some so thick they were bound with rubber bands, held the anguish of young women forced out of childhood, yet denied admittance into the sacred arena of motherhood. The director was a prune-faced old spinster with short, oily hair combed flatly behind her ears. She spouted off a litany of rules and regulations, and it soon became clear to me that, according to the Crittenton Code, nothing could be more abnormal than to be a hormone-driven teenage girl wanting to be loved. Flossie's was equipped to provide the, quote, appropriate correction needed for 50 girls at a time, she told my parents. No complication of this trial would be overlooked. Not only were doctors and nurses on duty, but also psychologists and social workers. It was assumed that each new resident came with a smudged past fueled by rebellious confusion. For this, she said, the Crittenton team was well prepared. The caseworkers prided themselves on their aggressive approach to reforming the behavior of their charges to prevent, as she described it, a repetition of the crisis that had brought the girls like me to the home. I had no idea what she was talking about. Making love wasn't a crisis. It was a direct route to the acceptance and love I had always wanted. It was romantic and beautiful. It made me happy, and sharing love that way with another person was even better than dancing. There was no way I would just submit to correcting like that. I bit my lip to keep quiet while the old lady yammered on. From the way she talked, it sounded as if the Crittenton goal was to make girls like us, girls like me, feel worthless so they could wear down our rebellion and then brainwash us into becoming dried up, loveless hags like they were. She continued her pitch to my parents. Along with regular Tuesday clinic checkups by the doctor, your daughter will be required to see a psychologist 3 times a week, as well as assigned to an adoption worker to make plans for the immediate relinquishment of the newborn at the hospital. Panic seized me. Were they not even going to let me see or hold my baby? I glanced at my mother. Her shoulders dropped from under her ears to their normal slope, and she nodded faintly. The news of my baby's instant disappearance was a big relief to her. Barring medical complications, the director said, I would be released from the hospital to Flossie's infirmary and could expect to go back home within 10 days. She smiled at my parents as if that were the end of it. Once delivered of both baby and sin, it seemed I would be deemed fit to rejoin the unforgiving society which had cast me out. The bottom line was, I had no rights and there was no options. I was a minor and nothing was going to happen without my parents' permission. My father had made that clear. Making this child part of our family had been so utterly unthinkable to my parents that we'd never even talked about it. And not wanting to lose their love, on top of everything else, the true believer in me had to agree that giving up my baby for adoption was the only thing to do. Then there was a matter of school. When the North Hollywood High girls' vice principal found out I was pregnant, I was suspended and told I would not be welcome back, even though I'd be unpregnant by the time of graduation. Flossie's offered benevolent sanctuary in its third floor schoolroom of manual typewriters, sewing machines, and carved up wooden desks, all of us from every grade in the same classroom at the same time. Though I had only completed half the 11th grade when I arrived, as long as I showed up every day at Flossie's Hideaway High, I would be marched along the paper trail, ultimately culminating in an early diploma issued from a school for handicapped children. Well, at least I finally made that promotion they wanted to give me in the 5th grade, I thought. Now, we strongly advise, the director said to my parents, that your daughter not mention to anyone here that the father of her baby is a Negro. The word fell from her lips like the diagnosis of a terminal disease. Finally, I'd had it with this horrible woman. I fought the urge to put both my palms on the underneath side of the desk and flip it over onto her smug, oily head. Instead, I stuffed a handful of fingers into my mouth. My mother nudged me to take them out. If you only knew what major catastrophe this minor sin is substituting, I thought. I dumped my hands into my lap and clasped my swollen fingers like a pile of fat worms. The old gas bag waited for a response from my parents, but my dad just coughed, so she barreled on. Privacy is the golden rule here at Florence Crittenton Home. The girls are allowed to call one another only by their first names, and we invite them, if they like, to make up a special name during their stay with us. She lowered her voice as if offering privileged information. We find it puts more distance between the crisis that brought them here and their healthy return to normal life. I could not imagine what this unpleasant woman thought was normal. All this time, she had been speaking about me in the third person as if I weren't even there. At last, she leaned forward and looked at me. Now, dear, is there some other name you'd like to be called? I thought of a billboard I'd passed by on my bus ride home from Hollywood. It hung alongside the freeway near the Pilgrimage, a rustic outdoor amphitheater that had been carved into a hillside opposite the Hollywood Bowl. Every year, the Pilgrimage held a big pageant about an Indian maiden named Ramona, and a rendering of the tragic Ramona with her long black braids was plastered on the billboard. Ramona, I told the director. My parents looked uncertainly at one another for my having picked such an ethnic alias. Be glad it's not Aretha, I thought. Don't let me be misunderstood. My parents probably hated to leave me there at Flossie's, even more than I hated to stay. At least living somewhere else, I could stop thinking about them for a while, but they weren't going to stop thinking about me. I'd been the only child in their house since I was 10, and now my mother and father were going home to an empty house for the first time in 26 years, with nothing left to call family, not even a shameful, rebellious daughter. Nothing says failure like having to send your kid away for someone else to rehabilitate. We lingered outside on the wide cement porch, the chilly autumn breeze making it irresistible for my mother to try to button my bulky knit sweater over my too fat front. I felt their agony, and I hugged my parents with more affection than I had in a long time. Looking into their sad faces, all I could think about was how much I'd hurt them. It was too late for me to pull together my unraveling destiny or undo the trouble I'd caused. A wave of terror swept through me that my parents might never love me again. I'll change. I won't lie anymore. I'll do everything I'm told. I promise. I'll become the daughter you want me to be. We said goodbye, and I watched them lumber down the steps, my father's arm warm protectively around my mother. He opened the door of the car and tucked her in safely inside before getting into the driver's seat. I could tell my mother was crying. My dad glanced back up at me as he pulled out from the car and drove away. A pair of pregnant girls passed me by on the steps, swayback Madonnas balancing basketball bellies on spindly legs. Whispers buzzed between them as they checked me out from head to foot. I was standing dumbly on the landing as if I didn't know where to go. One was a drippy-looking Maud, about 19. Her long blonde hair had been ironed straight and hung in 2 stiff sheets down the front of her face. The other had short brown hair in a flip, the top of her bangs embellished with a white clip-on bow. Both were in their last months of pregnancy, a form of status I would learn. That meant a newbie like me, with only 4 months along and barely showing was the bottom of the barrel. The 2 girls paused at the front door, trying to appear lighthearted, but they were gasping for breath from climbing up the stairs. Each dangled a shopping bag full of yarn. A pair of deadly ice blue needles poked out of the blonde's bag. "You the new girl?" accused the brunette, as her companion pulled open the heavy door. Giggling, they both disappeared before I could form the words to answer. I followed them into my new home, weighted with a baggage of confusion and loss. In the lobby, the tail end of the day's sunlight was streaming through a transom above the door. It had been cold out there on the steps, and the warmth inside felt good. I hoisted my broken spirit on the crutches of repentance and took a look around. To my left, a visitor's room boasted a sagging love seat, 2 straight back chairs, and a coffee table topped with a box of Kleenex. To my right was a reception area and a beat-up counter upon which sat a page of rules entombed in a yellowing plastic sheet next to a sign-out block. Residents could smoke cigarettes, but not wear slacks. Only below-the-knee skirts were allowed. We could leave Flossie's for an hour and a half every day, twice a week, and twice a week for 8 hours, but never stay out overnight. And since I was under 18, no one could visit me without my parents' permission. Well, I guess that eliminates everyone but them, I thought. Next to the sign-out book and bolted to the wall was an outgoing mailbox bearing the dandy Mr. Zip. I'm so sorry, whatever that was. had my parent already deliver phony letters that I would write from private school. That's a whole other story I won't even go into. A wooden sign hung over the reception area. It had been painted long ago, but little flecks were missing from some of the letters, but the command it required we obey was loud and clear. You couldn't enter Flossie's without heeding it, and you surely weren't getting out without having it tattooed on your brain. To get along, you have to go along. Something like the nauseating rush of anesthetic hit me as I sensed what came next. There was no ducking the cosmic machete that was about to slice through my tender, freshly regrown antenna. Once again, the high-frequency radar of my being was severed, putting out of commission that part of my soul I'd learned to count on for discerning what was real from what was fake. Just as I'd been an outsider in school, I expected to be mocked and rejected here at Flossie's. With my antenna back in cold storage, I braced myself for another season in the wilderness by shutting down all hope. I didn't expect much. If I didn't expect much, I wasn't as likely to be disappointed. I would try to go along, but I was certain I would never get along, no matter what I did.
Woo!
Is that enough?
Amen.
I mean, there's more, but hey, I think,
I know, guys.
And you know what, I'll just, yes, Halifa, so glad I left LA and came to Oakland where you were able to introduce me to dance. That was actually the last thing I was gonna read if anybody wanted to hear it. Following the great theme.
Why
Yes.
not? Why not?
All right, let's have some fun here.
Okay.
Halifa, oh God, I'm so happy to see you. Wow. And Teresa, yes, what a reunion this is. Good gracious.
So I think what we should do, Salima, is
Talk
if
about
anyone has anything they'd like to say, and then you can close out on that other passage. I'm going to try not talk. And yes, I wasn't looking for any particular, I just wanted some of your other experience, and I remembered that passage when you're being dropped off at that home.
I think you liked it when my mother tried to button my sweater. That's the part you liked.
Yeah, that was a great touch. But do we have anyone that would like to just talk before? Because I think what we'll do, I know some of you want to go, is we'll have a little conversation, those who want to say something now. Then Salima will read her closing passage. Abby will close us out, and we'll do it that way so that everyone knows. Yes, exactly.
Vanessa, from your mouth to God's ears, Vanessa.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What I would love to just say, can I, Auntie Akusawa, can I be heard? I don't know if I'm able to be heard. Okay, so there are people watching on Facebook. I just wanted to shout out a couple of people who, for one reason or another, I guess they weren't able to actually make it. But Jazz Sawyer is giving much love to you, as well as Harris, as well as Alexia, and I think her name is Arena, if I'm pronouncing it.
Arena.
Yeah.
Hi, Arena. Hi, Alexia. Hi, Jazz. Woohoo!
People who are joining via Facebook that I can see so far.
And a lot of people agreeing with Vanessa that it's a
Yay!
movie.
Go, girl! Prophetic word.
So if anyone wants to say anything, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, I would like to say something. This is Patty.
All right. This
Can
lady,
you hear me?
this lady who got me on the right track in the music that I was loving, to the right kind of music, and got me to the source of what I needed, is Miss Patty Henley.
You know, I want to comment about that home that you were in. Because, you know, I think I talked to you earlier this year, and we talked about the fact that it has been changed and renovated, and it is now a school.
Yes, yes.
And, you know, I do the role of Harriet Tubman, and I'm artist in residence down with the Music Center, and they sent us all over and they sent me to the Tritonells.
No way.
And yeah, and I kept, when I was there, I kept saying, you know, this reminds me of something, and it reminds me of your book. That's what it reminds of, your story. I couldn't wait to get back to tell you that I had done a performance of Harriet Tubman.
Wow.
Where you were pregnant as a kid.
Wow, that's crazy.
And I just want to say how much I love you, and how much I have just enjoyed watching this journey with you. And you're encouraging and inspiring and all of that. And I want to get my little 2 cents in here, because I'm actually supposed to be going out here to do a little thing before the sun goes down. And just want to say how much I love you, and congratulations.
Thank you, Miss Patty. It's because of you I'm celebrating my I'm celebrating my 40th birthday in Jesus this year. Woohoo! Jackie Clark, come back here. Jackie Clark, come back here. Oh my God, look who we have visiting with us. Woohoo! Of the Clark sisters.
Hi.
Jackie, woo!
It's been your story and your transparency helps so many people. You know, you never know, you know, how your life is going to touch somebody else's life. And you never know what you will impart into somebody. I mean, and it's just kind words, but your transparency and being able to tell your story was just absolutely amazing. I can't wait till the book comes out. And I pray that it becomes a movie for real. You should produce your manuscript to Lifetime. They did our story. They did an amazing job. I can contact you with the lady who, Dr. Holly Carter, I'm not sure if you know her, but yes, she was the why we were able to tell our story. It was her persistence and her love for us as a gospel singing group. And so just for you to understand, I just so enjoy even the moments that you've just read. They bless me so, because I can't even imagine what a young woman, a young girl at the time that you were having the baby, you know, had to go through, and all the decisions you had to make, you had to allow your parents to make, and you couldn't make them yourself. So I want you to know that I'm extremely proud of you, very happy for you. I love the readings. I love the book. I can't wait till it comes out so we can get it, so I can get it and pass it on to some young girls in my church who are going through the same situation. And you know, our parents don't want them to you know, continue with the baby with their family. So it's gonna bless so many people. But I want you to know I love you. I so appreciate you so much. And congratulations to you for your book. Hi, Akusra. I wanted to tell Akusra hi.
It's so good to see you. We did Mama Dope together.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. We did. I'm so glad to see you. I love you so much. I appreciate you.
And I have to say that, you know, Jackie, we didn't know each other in 1980, but
no,
you know what? It was gospel music, and it was you guys, among a few others, that changed my life, that opened the door for the Holy Spirit to come into my life. Before I knew Jesus, I knew the Bible, I didn't know anything about anything. I just knew that thing that I was always looking for, that Spirit of God came into my life through gospel music. And I love you so much. And you and Patty, and you know, you just have such place in my soul. And that we're friends is just amazing. It's just a miracle. It's like other people that I didn't know that I know now who influenced
and you know,
me. Like,
let me just say this to you too, and to everybody who's on. I lost my husband on Thanksgiving Day, and Selena sent me a card right after it happened. I was having a horrible day, but when I opened up her card and I read her card, I mean, I cried so hard. But just to know that you remembered me and you remembered, and you sent me something to encourage me and enlighten my heart on that moment. I want you to know I'll never, ever forget that. And I appreciate you so much. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Jackie. I love you, and I love your family.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Hey, Salima, this is Frank and Brenda.
Frank and Brenda, yay! When are we having a Margarita Wednesday, folks? Waiting for that.
Wednesday. Salima, Rosé Wednesday.
Pardon me?
Rosé Wednesday.
Oh, well, when's a Margarita Day?
I'm with you. I just want to congratulate you. That was so wonderful. It was so visual. It's so compelling. And hats off to you. I'm so happy for you and for you for sharing your story.
Thank you so
Wonderful
much.
job.
That means a lot to me. It really does. Because you're a wonderful filmmaker. In case anyone doesn't know, Frank is a filmmaker of an incredible documentary called Agents of Change. And if you haven't seen it, you need to go see it right now, especially if you're a younger generation and you're involved in what's the movement right now. You need to see where it was back in the day and what we did back then, what Frank's school did and what was going on in the West Coast too. You need to go see that film, or you need to rent the film.
Thank you. And you've been probably our biggest supporter too. I can't tell you how many screenings you've attended and how much support you've given. So thanks to you.
Every time it's on PBS, I watch it. I don't care how many times I see it. I'll still watch it just to say, yay, one more vote for Frank's movie.
We love you.
Oh, I love you guys too. I miss y'all very much.
Just asking on what platform is that, Salima, the movie?
Frank, where can they?
Well, it's aired on PBS. They've done it the last 2 years, and then they always stream it for a month once they show it. Otherwise, you can go on the website, agentsofchangefilm.com, and other information, upcoming screenings, and the film is for purchase also online at that website.
Okay, great. Agentsofchange.com.
Yeah, agentsofchangefilm.com.
Film.com. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone else before we hear this last piece?
Yes.
Hi, Camille.
Hey, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you. I'm here in Canada, and Salima, we met a few years ago at your beautiful home party, and I'm just thrilled to see you all. And I wanted to say thank you for this because, you know, years ago, I think you're bridging something really important as well, because years ago I went to the Beat Museum in San Francisco, and I asked where were the women poets from that time, and the guy said they were all locked up because they were considered crazy by their families.
Oh.
I think those were, you know, 50s, early 60s, and describing as an important bridge in terms of women, in terms of, but the music, the tie-in with the music is so beautiful, and the importance of how you felt about your time, your place, without a sense of, you know, the outsider is so important to reveal that, especially for that time. And I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you, Camille.
Yeah.
Here. Thanks, Akus.
Well, thank you.
Hi, Camille.
Love you, honey.
I'm just calling because Salima, even though this is an era movie, if you like, memory movie, I'm just calling these two young ones because they've been riveted as well. Nalan Kai, Abby's daughter, and Hada. So they've been hiding, but they've been riveted. And I think this is now, apart from the fact that at least this one I know knows every single Motown song. I mean, all those old songs, but just even the experience. And I watched her face during when you're reading about that young girl experience. because your writing is so truthful, it has no age barrier because it's so truthful.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. I'm
Yes.
so happy to see the girls.
Yeah, they're in hiding, but they're here. Okay.
I know. I know.
Okay, so I don't know if anyone has anything. Otherwise, I think we should hear whatever you want to close us out with, Salima.
Akusawa, can I say something?
Oh yes, hello.
Yeah, Akusawa, Abby, so good to see you. And I just want to say that once Salima came to Oakland, to Northern California, and I introduced her to the spirit of dance. This was even before I went to Ghana and got religion, the religion of Ghanaian dance. I introduced her to it, and that is what helped her to blossom spiritually. And so the dance, along with the music, is what really allowed her to really blossom and become the woman that she became. And I feel like, I had a little bit of something to do with that.
Alifu, you had a lot to do with it.
Well, I will say, Alifu, that you can't really know Salima without having heard your name.
You took the words out of my mouth, Auntie Akusawa. That was exactly what I was going to say.
Well, I'm just so grateful that we're friends. We continue to grow. When I moved to Hawaii, she came to visit me there. We've always continued to grow together as we become now elders, and proudly so. So I'm just happy to be now a part of her real coming out, because now she is telling her story to the world, and we need to hear it. It's so timely.
Thank you.
It's so very timely right now. Thank you, Salima.
Thank you, Halifu. And I have to say, there's been a consistent lesson that you've taught me all of our friendship. And you've had to continue to reteach it to me. And that lesson is love yourself. All right. Suddenly I lost her audio. Is there a reason? Oh, you've muted her.
Muted. We're ready for you to read.
Oh, you're ready for me?
I had one more question, but I could hold it till after.
No, come on, Vanessa, get it. Come on, Vanessa, let's hear it.
Actually, it's two questions. It's about the story, and so two things occurred to me that I was just curious about, and maybe you covered it in the book. But I wanted to know how much it cost your parents to put you in Flossie's, and since the book will also do the reunion with your daughter, which I hope you're going to read from now about that. Did you ever run into any of the other girls and women who were a part of the home in your life? Had you ever come across any of them or been in a space where they might have been?
No, because that would never have really been a thing that happened, because the whole point of us being there was to be hidden away so that we could come out as if nothing ever happened. I developed absolutely no allegiances to anyone there, and we were basically encouraged not to. But what was interesting was what Patty was talking about. I did a storytelling piece 3 years ago, a thing called Backstory, where they take a theme of a movie and you kind of twist a story to go with it, and it was called Psycho. So I used the story of the Home for Unwed Mothers, and there were five of us storytellers. So we had one rehearsal. I got up and did my piece, and another gentleman that was doing his, named Roger Lowenstein, said, "Salima, did you know that they turned the Florence Crittenton home where you lived into a charter school called the Los Angeles Leadership Academy?" And I said, "Well, I'd sort of heard that." And he said, "Well, I'm the founder of it, and my office is in the building that you lived when you were an unwed mother." I mean, like, really, what are the chances of that? Okay. There was only 5 of us there in the room. And so he said, come to he said, come to my office, this week, and we'll go down the basement and see if we can find your files. It was like looking for the body of Jimmy Hoffa. And that was just, these kinds of things happen and they're like amazing in themselves, but what they are just reinforcements for you to remember that you're just not in this by yourself, that there is something bigger than you are that is encouraging you along the way, that things are connected. And how much it cost my parents, I believe they had to spend $1,000 a month, which was a lot of money in 1967. And the fact that my father was basically self-employed, he was an artist. So, but when you're, a narcissistic teenager, which all gays teenagers are, you never think about what it cost them. I didn't at the time, but I do now. That's why later in the book, I talk about how as I got older, I really realized what I put them through, but it was kind of like there wasn't any other way to go because each of us stood where we stood, and there wasn't any real middle ground.
They didn't get you.
Pardon me? No, they didn't get me. And it was hard. I mean, especially with the background my mom had of great trauma and fear because she was illegal and undocumented, and they did try to deport her at one point. Anything outside of her idea and fantasy of what life in America was supposed to be like. And I even write about, she wanted me to be like Shirley Temple. When I was 3 years old, she dyed my hair blonde. So I'm not saying they were bad parents, but they didn't have the tools. They didn't have the tools. There's so many tools now for parents. They just didn't have the tools. They didn't know what to do. And it was a great shift in our culture in that era, from the 50s to the 60s. So they're raising this daughter who's like, and plus I don't see things the same way other people do. I am unique in that regard as well, in my head as well as just in everything else. And I don't mean unique as a compliment to myself. I just mean it's different. They didn't know how to make sense out of it. And so they just did the best they could.
No, of course. No judgment to your parents at all. Just, like you said, they didn't have the tools, they didn't understand, and it was a time of great transformation. So I was just curious.
Yeah, thank
you.
And
you depict that. In the book, you show your compassion for your parents in that passage that you read, just in the way you look at them saying goodbye to you and all that. It's there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vanessa.
Salima, Lana King was leaving. I don't know if you've gone, Lana. She sent up that she's going to have to go in a minute, but she was there.
Thank you, Lana, if you're still here. Lana's one of our original, girlfriends from Prayer Sisters, and still is.
Jennifer was the Jennifer too. Jennifer McCann. I don't know if it was Jennifer, or if there's another. Jennifer.
Jennifer Rivero.
No, is that Jennifer Rivera here? I wasn't sure if it was Jennifer McCann here. Anyway, we'll find out at the end.
We'll find out later.
Salima, it's Jeanette. Hi.
Hi, Jeanette.
It's Jeanette. Hi. I'm so proud of you. I love this story. I can't wait till the book comes out. I'm so encouraged for you.
Thank you, Jeanette.
It's a wonderful time for the Daughters of God. And I just wanted to tell you that I'm happy I could be here. Oh my God, I don't know how to make this screen not
Somebody with the initial J is also asking to speak after you, Auntie.
Yeah, I'm quick. I'm just quick. Hi, Akosua. I just can't be on the same call with you and not wave to you. So good to see you. God bless. All right. I'm relinquish the mic.
Jay, I see your hand. You can go ahead and speak.
Oh, my Jay!
Jeremy, come back!
Jeremy! Come on, Jeremy. Look at Jeremy!
Why can't we hear Jeremy? We can't hear Jeremy.
Now, maybe it's his audio because he is unmuted. I'm not sure what's going on with that one.
Well, Jeremy, if you can hear us, wave again. No?
Oh, he can hear us, but we can't. Oh,
there we go. Okay.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Wow.
Jeremy, we love you so much.
Yes,
Can you hear that? Did you hear that?
Can you hear the love?
Can you hear the love? I don't think so.
I don't think so either, but he must have been hearing you read. Yeah, but he's not responding like he hears. No, but that's speaking. If you can hear, you can respond.
Oh,
It may be his connection. He was trying to get on for a while. Salima, I just have to say, just before you start reading this last part, which I sadly don't think it's the part that I thought was so hilarious, but just to be clear, everyone, the book is out. You can get it. You do not have to wait. It's on Amazon. And I'm just extremely proud of you for 1,000 and billion reasons I'm not going to go into now, but this is your moment, Miss Woman. This is your moment.
Wendy wants me to read. I just think to keep the theme going, I was going to read about what happened to me when I got to Oakland and started doing African dance. But what Wendy wanted me to read was the first time I ever walked into a church. So I went from being like Jewish, which I knew nothing about I didn't even know anything about being Jewish. I didn't know anything about anything. And the first church I ever walked into was a Pentecostal Holy Roller Church in East Oakland. She liked that part, but I think there's too many things that I'd have to tell you before I read that so that it would make sense as to what I was referring to. So
absolutely.
Next time, Wendy Jim.
We'll get the book. Everyone will just have to get the book.
Yeah, and it's paper.
You can have all the parts.
Yeah, you'll get all the parts. And if you want to go on my website, the chapter 1 is up there for free. And chapter 1, the book starts when I got arrested when I was 20 years old and wound up in the elevator at Sybil Brand with the Manson girls. That was interesting.
I love that, Vanessa. Vanessa said we'll do a book club meeting. So
I love that. Vanessa, I would love that. And Vanessa, everybody listen, on my website, there is a whole free book club reading guide that you can go with some questions. And also it's kind of a fluid thing. Like if you have other ideas for things for us to talk about, I'll revise that. It's just a PDF. And also for all you youngins like Wendy, who didn't know she never heard the Rolling Stones songs. She didn't know who Johnny Taylor was. She didn't know who Patty Hearst was. I have made a cultural decoder that you can download, and it will tell you all the things that someone who's not of my generation, and also because my spectrum of music goes from like Van Morrison to Clara Ward and everything in between. And so a lot of people don't know all the stuff that I refer to. And you'll get to listen to the music or read about it in Wikipedia. So just go, and they're free. Just go to my website and click in there and you can get them. But yes, book club. I'm in for it.
Hada just said that's very helpful and thank you.
Who did?
Hada.
Yes.
Hi, Hada. Hi, Hada. My little baby.
Hey,
my little
Salima.
baby that's all grown up.
Tina just said bye too. She's jumping off. Oh, there's Jeremy.
Jeremy, come back.
Hello.
Hello. Yes.
Yay.
Yay.
Congratulations, Salima. Finally,
thank you.
You've triumphed. We celebrate you. And
thank you.
I already ordered 5 copies of your book and the hard copy. So when is that going to be ready, girl?
Wow.
Wow.
Wow, Jeremy. I will come and sign every single one of them in San Diego to visit you for sure. When this queue lifts.
Come on down. I'm ready.
I've been so ready to come visit you. I'm so happy to see you and congratulations because you have a big day coming up.
Yes, I passed my comprehensive exam for graduate school yesterday, so I am graduating on Saturday.
Woo! Congrats!
Congrats. Did you want to say anything else, Jeremy?
Salima, what a profound, well, first of all, I did glimpse your PDF. So it is my bed reading before evening time. So my partner Tristan loves music of 50s, 60s, 70s. We don't even know who plays on the radio because that's all we listen to. We only listen to our record player. So it's been so nostalgic for me to hear stories of the time and just learning about your life in Berkeley, about your lovers. So weird, Salima, to read. But it's a beautiful life, and I'm glad you're able to share it. And it's a story of triumph and love. So I'm so proud of you, and I'm glad that I met you through Akosua and Abby. So I love this community, and I praise you. Thanks.
Thank you. And speaking of the music, everybody, the other thing that's free on my website is there's 80 songs on a YouTube playlist that I made that are like videos, like vintage videos from the 60s of all the music that relates to my book, that's in my book or whatever. You have to kind of weed through the commercials because it's on YouTube, but it's like really nice to be able to go back and see that stuff. If you're not familiar with the music. And like I said, all that stuff is, yeah, Otis Redding. All that stuff is free on my website, so just go get it.
Woo!
Okay.
Thank you, Vanessa. So thank you very much, Jeremy. You're so loved. All right, so I just thought to continue the theme of dance, I would throw this in here for you to just see how it, and it's really small, but it's just, you know. When I lived in Oakland, I moved to, let me just say, I left Los Angeles in 1973 and I moved first to San Francisco, which I wasn't really happy with. And then I moved to Oakland, where I lived in North Oakland. I lived in different parts of Oakland for about 6 years. And that was a very meaningful time for me. And I wrote a lot about that in the book. In Oakland, I began taking African dance classes at 2 homegrown studios in my neighborhood, Full Spectrum on Telegraph Avenue and Everybody's Creative Arts Center at the corner of Broadway and 51st. I had been captivated by the drums and African dance ever since I was a kid and saw the 1959 movie Black Orpheus. The classic Greek myth of doomed lovers Orpheus and Eurydice was reset in Rio during Carnival to the rhythms of samba and the netherworld of Afro-Brazilian spiritualism. I watched Black Orpheus so many times that I knew every drum beat, dance move, and nuance of the supernatural drama became embedded in my soul. Something about the drums moved me. The power generated by a wall of live drummers at African dance classes in Oakland was intense, breathtaking, and reminiscent of what I'd felt at the Tammy Show and all those years of sneaking into clubs to dance to soul music. Oakland's African drummers had muscles like boulders, and the dancers were festooned in swirls of colorful fabric, leaping, jumping, flying across the floor to ecstatic climax with the drums. There were blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, all kinds and colors came to dance. Every class concluded with a circle in which each of us was encouraged to go into the center and do our own thing solo. As much as we admired technique and talent, what you did in the circle wasn't as important as the fact that you did it with your whole heart. The point was to be fearlessly yourself. And all who did were celebrated for that, no matter how awkward or out of step we might have been. Money was always tight in those days, so I asked Bonnie Grove, who taught African dance at Full Spectrum and was also the studio's owner, if she would let me design some business cards and calligraphy in exchange for her classes. Bonnie was beautiful, elegant, and friendly. Off the floor, she chain-smoked Marlboros and seemed to be holding back a secret storm. Yet she never presented herself as anything but peaceful and calm. She was a single mom with 2 small boys. Outside of dance class, I often ran into them at Lake Temescal, a swimming spot in the Oakland Hills, or the Co-op, a progressive supermarket in our neighborhood. From time to time, Bonnie came by the house on Market Street where I lived to hang out with me, and we became friends. I also became friends with Halifu Osamari, one of my dance teachers at Everybody's Creative Arts Center. I was in awe of Halifu, an exquisite African-American woman with reddish hair and a face full of freckles. She had traveled the world and seemed far above it in many ways. Her influence went beyond the moves she taught and into the realm of transformation that dance could foster, both in seekers like me and in the community at large. At Everybody's, I was exposed to amazing teachers from different African countries, including Malanga Kaskalord, a squat fireball who led us in hip-swiveling Congolese, darting across the floor ahead of us and rolling his eyes with madness and laughter as he demonstrated the steps. Dancing with Malanga was a joyous, maniacal experience, after which we dancers were little more than exhausted puddles of sweat, our hearts beating so fast we joked about calling the paramedics. African dance classes proved a safer outlet for my energy and emotions than romance had. They were sweaty, physical expressions of passion without the messy entanglements, confusion, and potential for disaster that came with relationships. 90 minutes of uncensored, throbbing collective intimacy, and then out the door and home to shower without all those unasked, unanswered questions, or any of that annoying next day longing and wonder. Just as when I'd first seen James Brown on stage, African dance spoke to the deepest part of me, a place complete in itself that didn't require anyone else's validation. It coaxed out the real deal truth, unedited, unembarrassed, and unashamed. My body, a calibrated instrument responding to the telegraph of the drums, and then acting that out in front of everyone. Dance became life itself. The confidence and strength that African dance gave me by forcing me to be myself at raw and uncensored dimensions, and then to be celebrated for that in the circle, became a powerful, positive force in my life. And that's...
Woo!
Thank you.
Okay, Abby, come and we'll. So, I mean, to everyone, because I know we're not even seeing everyone, and everyone on Facebook and everyone everywhere. The book, we can get it on Amazon, I know. Yes, that's what it looks like since I lost my baby. And I'm just so excited to be going to follow this. We'll talk, because as you read, you know, I have the audio book company, yes. So I have ideas because I want to get the book on audio real quick. Yes. But this has been absolutely amazing, amazing. And
thank you.
Just knowing you go through, and I mean the yes, as Vanessa says, because we can't satisfy all needs. I think it was Vanessa mentioned when you get with your daughter, and I mean there's so much in this book. And Salima went, in fact, because some of us, when she goes, oh, she was part Super Pop, we were all part of Christian Entertainers. And when Salima began the journey to find her daughter, and then just as it was happening, called Oprah, and Oprah actually did a show, so them meeting live was an Oprah show. I mean, there's just so much. I can't even talk enough to say how much and get this book. So
well, the first person that I called after I made the first contact with my daughter on the phone was Akosua, and before I made the contact, she was my prayer before, my prayer after, through the whole thing. And then she had this idea about the Oprah thing, and before we knew it, we were on there. And you can go to my website again. There's the clip. SalimaNimoy.com, and look in, well, you can see it right from the front page. There's a click through to watch the little segment that we're on from that show. And it shows our actual, they sent a crew to film us actually meeting at the Oklahoma City airport, which was just amazing. And then we went later to the studio and told our stories. So that was pretty cool.
And I want, because we could be here all night, I want Abby to close this out.
Thank you, Abby.
Well, thank you, Salima. You know, what can I say? Acosta and I really wanted to do this.
Thank you.
In the name of the Busia Foundation, I have to say, for a number of reasons. One, our mother was there some of the time.
Yes.
And the Busia Foundation was founded by Mother. And we do all kinds of things. It's not really to talk about the foundation, but to say a thank you. Because when you're running a small organization like that, a mother founded it in honor of father, and we keep it going in honor of mother. And we've had our ups and downs, and it's been tough. But Salima has consistently been a benefactor. And truth be told, some years our only benefactor. And you can't, how can you say thank you? We do the work we do, but how can you say thank you? And we've both been part of this. There was one section of it where I was so proud. Salima wanted to run away and have some solitude. So she came to Rutgers, you know, and worked on editing it there and so on. So it just felt right for us to do, you know, it's coronavirus time. We can't have a proper book party. So we were just proud to host this as a way of saying thank you for somebody who has been so supportive to us.
My mama was a midwife. My mother's life's work. She was a midwife. Birthing babies was her thing. Yeah.
So we just wanted to find a way to say thank you for your support.
Well, I have to thank you too. I have to thank you too, because that trip to Rutgers was just, it was transformational for me. I had never been in a place like that. And I'll tell you one thing that, if nothing else, you've said that's prophetic, Akusuwa. You said to me a long time after we first met, which was 1987, you said, "You're going to love my sister." Yep. And I got a chance to love your mom as well. She made me this bracelet. And oh man, that is, you know, to have that in your soul is just awesome. To have you guys and the rest of your family and your mom in my heart is just a blessing. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And we're just going to pray for you and keep you up, because this is going to be a journey. And I know it already has been a journey, but it's been a heart-wrenching, a sacrificial, painful, searching journey. And we're going to pray for you that this next part will be the part where you've paid your ticket, so that the cruise boat actually takes off on the ocean and you get to sail and gaze through the windows as you move.
Yeah. And I get to sit in the back seat and have fun with everybody instead of being the hood ornament.
Yeah. But congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you everybody.
Thank you.
I love you all. Thank you so much. God bless you.
God bless. Good night, all. So, Wendy, you black us out.
I'm gonna black you out. I was just about
Thank you,
to
Vanessa.
end.
Thank you, my Wendy Jim.
You're very welcome. So I'm gonna end this so we can convert the recording. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Goodbye for now. Only for now.
Bye.